I think that was kind of actually what gave me the strength to say, fuck it, I'm going to be shitty at something.
Steph, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
Yes, likewise. I'm a big fan, obviously because we're in similar spheres, of content. And so, just wanted to kick it off. What are the ingredients to a really good question?
Ooh, that's a great question. Wow. I think that it's less about the question and
Mm.
more about knowing where to put a question.
Oh, okay. For example.
Like, I think that at least when I ask questions, I'm looking for what matters to the other person. And I think that the kind of the magic comes less from like the exact thing that I say, but more in like the space that you press for more. So if I can feel like somebody is, um, they, give a little bit and I can sense that there's a deep well in the part that they just said, it's like asking for a specific, asking like, why, how, like sometimes I just say more, like it's not really like a genius like, oh, I'm coming up with this magical potion of a question. I think it's just like, knowing when somebody has something that they really want to share, but they maybe need a little bit more of a nudge to open it up.
So it sounds like, whenever you're hearing something from someone, there are a million different directions you could take the conversation based off of what they said. And it's this ability to kind of, feel out and sense, which of those directions, kind of has that deep well, as you said. There's this, a EQ piece of it, which I love. Do you think that's something that people can develop if they're interested in asking better questions?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I kind of think like beyond, like there are definitely some things like, physical limitations that will prevent you from doing like certain things or whatever. But I think like for the most part, anyone can like develop and get really good at a skill that they don't have yet.
And so has that sixth sense, I would call it, always been something you had, or is that something you had to cultivate?
I think that the asking questions specifically is something that I've always had, but I've had to cultivate several other things that like are working in tandem with it for me to be able to do what I'm doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And could you dive a little bit into what are some of those skills, I would call them, that you had to develop that complements kind of that sixth sense that you've always had?
Yeah, well, so okay, for example, I before I was doing social media short form content, I was doing a podcast. And it's linked in my bio right now, and I'll probably bring it back like eventually when I am able to expand more. But like for example, I was lugging a suitcase full of equipment in and out of people's houses, and doing like setting up what essentially a production crew would set up. And then I'd edit all of the episodes. So it's hours and hours and hours and hours of going through multiple times, like leveling all the audio, right? Like all of this work, this huge lift. And then you put out the episode and um, nobody hears it. Right. Like, or the little small community that of your friends and people who know you and know what you're doing, hear it. But, for some reason, like the short form interviews have reached people that I've been doing. And the journey from lugging that gigantic suitcase and going through this whole, learning how to edit, learning how to do all of the equipment and set it up, and all of that. The journey from that to doing what I'm doing now was like a huge, huge expanse of experimentation and questions. And it's like, how long should the podcast episode be? Where does it go? How do I, and it's just, so the question is like the innate thing, but how do you make use of the skill? And I think figuring out how to make use of something that you're naturally good at is like just such a complex journey of experimentation and struggle.
1,000%. I think because when it comes to a hard skill, say someone is really good at sports or painting, it's very clear on how they can translate and transition that skill to, something that they can apply to the real world. But then if you think about it, this ability to listen well and, have high emotional intelligence in situations is a soft skill. And so it's like the challenge that you're speaking of is how can we translate this soft skill that it isn't as clear as to how we can bring this to life in our content, which I think you have done beautifully. Another Go ahead.
Oh no, I thank you. I was just going to say that um I think that the person with the hard skill that is easily made use of probably has other skills, that are crucial for them to make use of the hard skill that they struggle with, right? It's like everybody is blessed and cursed with their own little mix of strengths and weaknesses. And I feel like it's such a it, it can get like really dark and really difficult for like anybody because you don't know where people's weak points are. You know what I mean?
Completely. And it sounds like that journey of figuring out what that mix is for each individual is so difficult. And I imagine you went through something similar, if I were to guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did that look like for you?
Oh my God. I mean, well, before, like the, before interviewing, it was music. Like I was really chasing, I was performing, I was chasing music really, really hard. And before music, it was writing, and I was going to be, I wanted to be a spoken word poet. And, it's just like, it goes so far back. Like, but I've spent years and years switching between different mediums. And it's been like really wonderful and also really agonizing because at some point you realize like, wait, I'm jumping from thing to thing, and am I following my creative intuition, or am I like running from the pain that is required to do what we're talking about, like get really good at something, or like work at the skills that support the thing that you're naturally good at, that are like do not come natural to you.
Yes, this idea of throwing a bunch of things against the wall and seeing what sticks is a similar journey that I've experienced as well. And it's funny how we both kind of ended up at interviewing, which I think is really cool. One thing you talked about earlier was where you are now. The first door got opened from you doing the entire like video production interviews for your Sit on the Floor podcast. And I think that concept is so beautiful because it's this idea of I don't know what the future will look like, and if I open this door, who knows where this door could lead to. I have no idea. All I know is that inaction is not going to lead anywhere, so I just have to take a step forward in some type of direction and hope that the clarity of my vision will get crystallized. And sounds like that has been happening for you lately. And so I think that's I get goosebumps thinking about that.
Yeah, well, can I also ask you like
Yeah.
what your kind of like throwing things at the wall and experimenting has looked like?
Yeah, for sure. So before before street interviewing, it was a cinema cinematic hiking YouTube channel, which was really cool. I started that over the pandemic. That one was beautiful because that one was purely like a creative aspect, and I didn't create with the intent of having people look at it. It was just something that I wanted to cultivate, but ultimately switched to something else. I think before that it was a blog about branding and how companies can use that. How companies can use what has been written in the past to apply to what they're doing in the modern day. So that was really cool. And it's funny because this idea of switching the things that I did or hobbies like goes all the way back to like when I was like in middle school. And so, that has been like a fascinating reflection in terms of, okay, so why am I like this? And like, how can I use that to my advantage? And also, what do I need to commit to? Because, the person that chases all rabbits, doesn't get any of them. And so
Mm,
that has been a long thought process and reflection, I finally come to.
well said.
Yeah, 1,000%. And so I loved kind of hearing like the parallels in our journey. So, after, looking at some of the videos you've posted in the past, so it seems like, kind of the first video you made that really started to gain traction was three things I tell myself when I'm embarrassed. And it was a clip of you at the gym, super sweaty, which I thought was awesome. And so, do you kind of remember what your thoughts and headspace were at kind of when you started to see traction on that video?
Okay, that's so s- impressive of you to have done that like level of research. But what's funny and what you
Mm.
wouldn't be able to know from looking at that is that actually got a bunch of that picked up after other videos had picked up,
Oh,
which
got it,
is
got it,
so
got it.
funny. Like a few people had liked that, and then it just the algorithm, I guess, went back in time and grabbed it and just sent it out. And I was like, really, that one? Okay.
Oh, that's awesome. I think that's one good thing about having a strong niche with the content that you make is people can look back and enjoy that content as well. So it seems then kind of the next video that went viral, and let me know if this was quote unquote maybe the first one, which was why you will marry the wrong person. And it was a quote: "There's no perfect partner. There is who you make it work with." Do you kind of remember what your headspace was when that video started taking off? Because that was the next one that popped off.
Yeah, so I can tell you, so I before I started the Instagram, I posted on TikTok every single day for over a year,
I love
like
it.
420 something days in a row.
Hmm.
And most of them were only got only a couple hundred views.
Yes.
Um, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't thinking about how to like reach or speak to other people. I was just trying to say things that made sense to me and then just sort of sending them out into the ether. And it was not until I was having a conversation with somebody and it kind of came to this head of like, I should set a growth goal. Like I'd been doing it for over a year, and I had had just a few videos that had, you know, gone a little bit viral. Um and yeah, the growth goal is really what kind of set everything else in motion, because I started looking at what was working for other people, and I started using their sort of like the format that they would structure a video in. And I even used hooks that other people, like topics that other people were talking about that I wouldn't necessarily think to talk about. And then I would write my own content. And those were the first couple videos on TikTok. And one of them is the one that you just mentioned that really blew up and it freaked me the heck out. And I was like, um, not gonna, great that that worked. I didn't expect it to work like that, you know? So, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, that's,
Yeah. It sounds like you started putting a lot of intentionality behind, kind of the content that you made and the strategy behind it. One thing that I think is very telling, Steph, is clearly there's a need in the market for the type of content that you make. And where do you think that comes from for people? I have kind of
hmm,
some thoughts, but I would love to hear your perspective.
that's interesting. I haven't thought about that, but yeah, I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I I think that I have just been trying to follow what I need in content.
Yeah.
Like I and then figuring out how do I've been doing that for the whole time, but that now it's more like how do I frame it in a way that like is clear and lands with others. But I think for me, like if I think about what I am looking for in media content in my day-to-day interactions overall in life, it's things that are honest and meaningful and like inspiring and that make you feel connected to other people. So that's kind of my answer for myself, and I guess I would assume or hope that that is also the same for like people who are enjoying what I'm making.
Yeah, and I think you or your content definitely gives off that energy. It's interesting, you mentioned you created the content that you needed yourself, and what you specifically needed was, there was kind of this, yearning for, authentic and, genuine content that just kind of made you feel good after watching it. It was interesting, as I kind of ponder on that question for myself, I think it's interesting to think about how lonely and unconnected people can feel like in the current day and age. I think for me, specifically like in the street interview world, it's like incredible to see how many people I talked to who were yearning for some sort of, authentic connection or an encouraging word, because that's something that they have been so starved of. And so, this ability to, see that happen, kind of through your screen, with the content that you make is, a huge reason that I think, people resonate with it so much. And so, Steph, as I scroll through your videos, you have so many, incredible questions and meaningful, kind of prompts, to talk to people with. Are those questions that you wish you had been asked before?
Hmm. Not necessarily. I think that, oh, well, I guess, yeah, it's funny. When I make videos that are like more tactical about how to ask questions or these are the things that you can say, it's more like I feel like it looks like I'm sitting down and trying to brainstorm these things and then I'm employing them with people, but it actually is like the other way around. It's more like it's kind of just in the way that I engage with people, and then I'm sitting down going, okay, what do I say to people? Like how did these interactions happen? What am I doing? What am I saying? And then I'm sharing that. So it's not necessarily like I want people to ask me these questions. It's more like these are the things that I like tend to ask in as an attempt to really see another person. And so I don't necessarily have specific questions that I want somebody to ask me, but I do want to be seen in the way that I'm trying to see other people.
Yeah, with communication, we're given this incredible opportunity to really help people feel seen, heard, felt and understood in such a beautiful way. When is the last time that has happened for you?
Ooh, it's really, that's a really good question because it's not, I just feel like it's kind of rare, like, um, in general, in general.
Agreed.
I feel like in a lot of environments, in a lot of, um, I don't know, just people are just not like interested in really seeing people. But yeah, I guess I would say like my close relationships like are really wonderful and I feel very very seen and like understood by those people.
You touch on something that I've given a lot of reflection on, this kind of idea of how most of our day-to-day reaction or interactions tend to go. And how I've kind of framed it is they are done, in service to get to know you, but not done in the service to get to understand you.
Mm,
And I think when we can start to, ask, those type of questions to see why someone ticks, and have that, kind of answer why they did what they did, I think we can begin to, really uncover, some beautiful things about people, which
mm,
I've had some, like really memorable experiences about. And so, okay, so that video popped off where you mentioned, there's no perfect partner. There's who you make it work with, and then it was really cool to see you take what you've been talking about and apply that to talking to people and creating content from that. What was kind of your first experience, doing that? Because I'm sure that was a story in itself.
yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. I was doing and am still going to do the talking head videos because that was the easiest thing for me to sustain to hit my daily rule. Like to do one every day was really intense. And I did transition out of that because I feel like I got what I was looking for from it. But when I first started that format, I was like, okay, what can I definitely do every single day? And it's me sitting in a room by myself with my thoughts and writing and then speaking my thoughts. That works. So, um, the interview, when I posted the first interview with Charles, I was thinking, this isn't going to perform well because it's totally different from everything else that I've been doing. But I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm just going to throw it out there. And then it blew all of the other highest performing videos out of the water. And I thought, "Oh, okay, if I could put something out that was like actually me creating, not that the other videos weren't creative, but I feel like it's a bit more artistic and a bit more of my creative voice, and not so focused on me. I was like, if I can put that out and that is doing well and people like that, now this is the podcast interviewing. This is my curiosity and fascination with other people. These are all these things that I have been carrying and have wanted to share, and it got through. Okay, perfect. Like if that gets through, like that's what I want to do. So it's probably going to be a mix of the two formats, and then I'm going to add in other ones like as I continue to grow. But I was shocked and thrilled when that actually resonated with people.
Yeah, I'm sure pleasant surprise is an understatement. And, that type of content, as you mentioned, is so much different because, there's, one thing to, kind of be sitting at our desk by ourselves creating content. And there's another to, actually be, you know, using this gift that's so important to us, to connect with other people. And I'm glad you got to share Charles's story, from that as your first video. I'm not surprised it blew up. One thing you mentioned was, and why you were so happy that that format performed well is because it teed you up to really get into things that you are really interested in down the line. And one of the things you said is it's so important to you to see and understand other people. Where does that come from for you, Steph?
The need to see and understand people.
Yes, and care for them.
Um, I think that so my friend told me this uh, religious story called Breaking of the Vessels. And I believe it's a Jewish story, but it's something like the world was a ball of light. I'm going to get this wrong. So I'm going to mess it up a little bit. Like I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but
No worries.
it's like there was this huge ball of light. It couldn't be contained and it exploded. And then the bits of light scattered about the world. And now it's our job to go find those pieces of light and uncover them. And that's kind of how I see it. It's like I see it like there's a piece of light in everybody, and I'm interested in uncovering the piece of light in myself and in other people, and then like sharing that with others.
Wow, that is a beautiful story. I'll have to look into that. I think this relentless sense of optimism to see that in everyone, I think is something so beautiful, especially, in a world where sometimes we can be, standoffish, towards strangers, or, feel like, why do I need to make the effort to talk to that stranger? Like I just want to keep to myself. I think that's something that I'm going to try and remind myself of, in times where, I feel those things. So that's a beautiful story. You know, um, it's interesting stuff. One thing you touched upon earlier was you posted on TikTok for so long without seeing any traction. And from what we've been talking about, that seemed to be, uncharacteristic because, before, you would switch between, different activities. And so what helped you stay 10 toes down and keep your feet to the ground to be able to maintain that regardless of the end results?
That is a really great question, because you are kind of poking at I think the kernel, like the key to what has gone well for me recently. And um, it was when I first started it, I started it. The first video I made, I remember it was so stupid. It was literally just me. Like I came up with this idea at my friend's house on Cape Cod, and I looked at her and I was like, you know what I should do? I should share a thought on TikTok every day. And she's like, uh-huh. And I'm like, no, this is the best idea I've ever come up with. She's one of my like few friends who's been listening to me come up with ideas for like a decade now. She's like, okay,
Mm.
Steph, like good one. I'm like, it'll be great. Like I like went into the bedroom and I was just like, I've always wanted to share my thoughts. And so here's my first one. That's like the video.
I need to go find that.
Oh my God. You'll have to scroll back so far. But I the what kept me going with it was a rule. I kid you not, Timothy. It was like for some reason, when I put out that, and I felt it too. I felt it when I put it out. I was like, this is the thing. Like, I'm going to do this every single day, no matter what. I'm not going to miss a day. It doesn't matter how ugly I feel like I look. It doesn't matter how stupid I think I sound. It doesn't matter if I get to the end of the day and I make something and I don't like it and it's shitty, I still have to post it. I cannot miss a day. And um and it was like the willingness to be shitty. It was the
Yes.
willingness to be bad at it and to have it feel embarrassing and icky and ugly. And then what would happen is I would post it and then I'd wake up the next day. I would wake up the next day and I'd
You
go, oh
survived.
my God, I didn't explode. That is crazy. That's crazy. Like putting yourself on, it's scary. You know, it was like probably one of the things that I was the most afraid of, but one of the things that I most wanted to do. So it was sticking to the rule, no matter how stupid or bad I felt like it was, that um that like changed the course for me.
And naturally, Steph, I'm sure you can imagine, what the next question is because, I'm dying to know, but where did that rule come from? Because I'm sure there's a lot of deliberation and moments in your life that made you want to finally, commit to that.
Yeah, um I think it came from, I think actually the format came from the rule. Now that I think about it. Like,
Mm,
I think I had switched between so many different artistic mediums, and
yes.
I'd gotten caught in so many spells of, like, inaction due to perfectionism, that I was, like, desperately searching for something that I felt like I could complete every day. I was dying to find something that I like, what is something I can do where I'm like, this is fine. And so I felt like TikTok specifically, which it's super funny because that's not like, the TikTok is not like the Instagram is the one that is doing really well. It's so funny, but I just felt like it was something that I could do. It was a small enough bite for me to chew. So I was looking for something that I could have that I could consistently complete, and then that's kind of what I landed on.
Another beautiful parallel, Steph. So I started the same way, actually.
Yeah,
So,
tell me about it.
yeah. And the idea is pretty much what you said. I just, have thought about it and worded it a little bit differently, but, all, mean the same thing. So when I started, I was at a point where I was like, my muscle to deal with long term gratification is so weak. And
Mm.
my muscle for short term gratification is so strong in such a negative way. And I'm like, I just want to do something without changing, pivoting, or switching, regardless of the results that I'm seeing from it, just so I can continue to get reps in for this muscle, this, figurative muscle of, long term gratification. Because the one thing I knew, at that point was whatever big dreams that I want to accomplish in life is going to require that muscle to be like so strong, to, continue to act regardless of, the results that we see days, weeks, or months. And so my time frame was a little bit shorter than you, though. I really commend you for, sticking through it for a whole year. But mine was um, 3 months posting twice a day without seeing any traction. And then at the end of this 3 months, I got a little bit of a response, from the algorithm. And I was like, hey, like, I think there's something here.
On Instagram, TikTok, or both?
TikTok.
Nice, nice. Wow. Oh, that's so awesome.
And so,
It's so important. It's so important.
yes, 1,000%. And so where are you in terms of, your ability to stick it out over the long term now?
Oh my God. I feel like I'm in a separate planet than where I was before. Um, I think that like more important than the willingness to stick it out is the willingness to be bad. That's the
Mm,
part that I really, because you have to be willing to be bad in order to be willing to stick it out. You know,
thousand
I guess
percent.
they go like hand in hand, but it's like I wasn't willing. I was too attached to the egotistical, like, everything I put out has to make the earth stop turning. And it's like, okay, well, that's wonderful, but like, but no one is seeing it, like, So I don't know. I was just, you know what? Like, I'm going to do this over and over and over again, and I'm going to suck at it, and I'm not good at it. And that's fine. Like, it's not the end of the world. If I put out stories or thoughts or whatever that I think are, that I can see myself are not great, but, um, yeah, I'm a lot farther than I was with that skill. It feels very strong.
Do you feel comfortable if we talk about your dad?
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah.
So, as I was kind of, looking through the content that you've made, I also went through your podcast episodes and, saw the two episodes that you did with your dad, or maybe there was more, but I saw the letter and then also saw, kind of that, last conversation that you had with him where he mentioned to you that he was at peace. And
Mm.
so the experience that you went through with your dad, Steph, has that influenced how you're living your life now and what has changed?
Yeah, I think that that was kind of actually what gave me the strength to say fuck it. I'm going to be shitty at something. Like that it gave me an enormous sense of urgency, and it also, like, basically what it the way it made me feel is, oh my god, this gets this dark on its own. Like life gets this dark without any of my help. Okay, like you want to take my favorite person in the entire world away from me and make me watch him wither? You want to do that? Fine. That means I am not going to waste another second of this beautiful and precious life. That's how that made me feel. Like, it was such a horrific thing. And um it just made me feel like, okay, like all of these incredibly deep, far reaching insecurities that have claws around my brain. Like, I don't like physical insecurity, or, egotistic. It's not good enough. It's not high production. And it's not all of this stuff, right? It's like, oh, fuck that. Like, fuck that. Like, I don't have time. And so I don't need things to happen for me overnight, but like, I'm going to do what I want to do every day.
First off, Steph, I just wanted to say, how incredible, I'm sure your dad was, even just, listening to him in y'all's conversation. Clearly, he was extremely proud of you. And I'm glad he got to, say that to you, explicitly. I think that was a really beautiful moment from the episode. And I know the year anniversary of his passing was, a couple of months ago in August. So, I really hope you got to, kind of celebrate the life that he lived in a meaningful way. And I'm sure, you had some, really deep reflections, during that time. You talk about this idea of, seeing your dad, pass away slowly, and, you being home and taking care of him during that time. It really woke you up. I think there are a lot of people who are currently dealing with the same insecurities or fears that you just mentioned, and those are all holding them back. What advice would you have for them?
Oh, um, the first thing is that it is exactly as hard as you feel like it is. Like, not as in like, oh, it's your job to make it feel less hard. I mean, like, no, if it feels completely like debilitating, like you have to like wage a war to get yourself to do like the smallest tiny thing, or, post a picture, or like wash a dish, or like whatever like, if you feel like you have to fight a battle to do the tiniest thing, Yes, it is that hard. You are not crazy. It's like the most complicated web of, darkness that can spread itself over your brain. And that's real. That's fucking real. But because, like, the acknowledgement of how hard it is, and the acknowledgement of feeling like you are so far away from where you want to be, and like you're stuck in molasses or it's cement, like it's just slowing you down and holding you to the acknowledgement that that is real, and that is true, and that it really is that hard, is what gives you the permission to begin.
I think that permission to begin is so important because without acknowledging the reality of how difficult it is, we then invalidate ourselves and look at other people and say, they're doing it. So, why can't I? Like, what's wrong with me? And, this idea of nothing's wrong with you. What you're experiencing is exactly what you think you're experiencing, and there's no fantasy or what ifs about it. Is really freeing, and sounds like when you experience that moment, that kind of broke you from the chains that you were experiencing, and really getting to shine that light from the vessel that broke within you, with everyone. So I think that is incredible. How do you want to honor the life that your dad lived?
Oh, um I think that I want to honor him by carrying him on in what I do. So it's really important to me to act from a place of the values that I feel were most central to him, and that are by consequence most central to me.
I think it's emotional to kind of think about the people that have passed in our lives, and the influence and sacrifices that they've made for us, because by living through those values that you said, it can be the best way to kind of honor the memory and time that they've poured into us. And ultimately, the biggest lesson that I've learned on that front is continue to pass it on in whatever way we can, because we don't lose anything from doing so.
Yeah, I also will say that I think that what I was saying about like the light earlier,
Yes.
like that is my dad.
Mm.
Like the light is in everybody. And so sometimes I feel like, even though in an earthly sense, this is kind of going to get a little spiritual, but even
Please.
though in an earthly sense, my dad was my dad, I guess I believe and I feel that when I get to a moment where I am able to reach that light in another person, it's like sometimes I get it and I feel him. And I'm like, oh, that's my dad. In Lucia, my friend, in this person that I just talked to, and or the same sort of values, or it's like this essence, and it's like you touch it, and it's like, oh yeah, there you are, you know.
I think the really impactful thing about getting to do that for someone else is sometimes that person doesn't even realize that that light exists, within them. And by shining a light on their light, it's this incredible moment where they're like, I didn't even know that existed. I think a really beautiful example I've heard of that recently was one of the front desk staff at the gym I used to go to. So he really wants to do stand-up comedy, but he hasn't been able to take the leap and finally put himself on stage to do so. And my friend had this incredible idea to FaceTime one of his friends actually out in LA, who's one of like the biggest comedy influencers out there. And he's like, had them have a conversation with each other, and he gave him a pep talk of like, hey bro, like I was in your exact spot 5 or 10 years ago, and I know how it feels not to take that first leap to put yourself and be vulnerable and be bad out there. And I just wanted to let you know, like, you can do it. And a week later, that front desk staff booked his first gig. And I'm hoping that it's like to the races after that. And I think, being with ourselves so much, because we're with ourselves 24/7, we can sometimes lose sight of, that vessel. And sometimes it just takes someone else to see that in us for us to be like, wait, like that was there all along. Like, how crazy is that? And, Steph, for you, what has been a moment where you feel like you really did that for someone else? And what was that conversation like? And I know it feels weird to say like, oh man, like I touched this person, so hardcore this one time, but I'm sure something sticks out.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's a really beautiful story that you just told. That like really touched me. Um, um, I think it's like, little things. Like my
Mm.
friend just told me a couple weeks ago that when she came to visit me here and she saw me being a psycho with my camera and graciously endured it. Um, she got home and she told me a couple weeks ago that she that it really inspired her and she's going to look into buying a camera. She's going to buy a camera. And
Mm.
that really like touched me. Or, sometimes it'll happen with like a recipe or something. It's like you cook something for someone and then, oh, I went home and I made the, it's just like, oh, that's so sweet. And but that friend that I mentioned with the camera, she's somebody that's done that for me also. So that was really cool to see
Mm.
it kind of like return, like, wow, that's so, yeah.
It's crazy the direct impact we can have on people indirectly by just living in a way that is true and authentic to ourselves. And people see that and get inspired by it. And it's crazy because, sometimes there can be like imposter syndrome when we hear that happens. It's like, man, you really inspired me to do this. And then, my reaction if I hear that from someone is, wait, really? Like, who am I to inspire anyone? Like, I'm just doing, what I feel compelled to do, to, kind of, honor that light that I feel like I've been given. And so when you kind of think about the space that you're in now, Steph, who are people that have kind of really cultivated that light for you, in kind of what you're doing now? I know you mentioned your dad was a big influence, your friend, as well, but would love to hear if there are any other parties involved.
Oh my gosh, yes. This is gonna sound funny, but Lady
Please.
Gaga.
Okay, let's go. Love Gaga.
Yeah, no, but really though.
Yeah,
And there are like, if I can think of the people that like Liz Gilbert, who
that sounds familiar. Who's that again? Can you jog my memory?
she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, but that's
Okay.
not my favorite book of hers. Like,
Is
no, I
it the
like,
book that she wrote about creativity your favorite?
yes, you know it. Yes,
Yeah.
everyone should read it. Everyone who has a pulse should read that book. It's called Big Magic.
Yes.
um, and yeah, I mean, I could keep naming people, but
Yeah, let's talk about those two. So when I think about Lady Gaga or Elizabeth Gilbert, and anytime someone inspires us, or we're able to get something from them, what have you specifically got from them that inspires you, Steph?
well, with Lady Gaga, something that really kind of took my breath away with her
Mm,
is when she first started doing music, that you have an idea that you think of when you think of her. And before she started expanding into jazz and, classic and all this like other stuff, she was this sort of like electro pop superstar, like making music for the masses. And at some point, I discovered this archive of videos when she had black hair and was Stephanie Germanotta, 19, performing at open mics in New York City. And I watched her as she's a classically trained pianist. And I see her, with her original songs with the piano chops doing fully acoustic music. And when I came across that, I was also doing music. And what really kind of just hit me in the gut when I discovered it was, oh my God, like she took what she was doing and she sacrificed. She kept the integrity and the spirit of her art, but put it in a wrapping paper that would be able to reach people. And she sacrificed being holistically understood for a period of time in order to do that. And I think you have to do that as an artist. That never really goes away because you're never going to be like fully holistically seen by people. But that was just shocking to me and sort of like, oh my God, here you have this vastly intelligent, multidimensional, like, classically trained like person, and she is letting herself like she knows that she's not going to be fully seen in this lens that she's chosen, and that's okay. And then as her career has unfolded, she's let more and more colors and sides of her come into the light. But that really like inspired me.
I think you touch on a theme that we were talking about earlier, which was, kind of, cages or limits that we can put ourselves in. And so this idea of, needing to make things that are holistically understood by everyone is a cage. And the moment that Lady Gaga broke out of that cage, to your point, is when, she really started creating, some of her most beautiful work. And if I think about that transition for kind of a before and after, for you, Steph, what does that look like?
Before and after what?
Before you had this kind of need to be like holistically understood and, the ability to kind of break out of that and realize that you'll never be able to please everyone.
Mm. Um, it's something that I still struggle with and will probably always struggle with. But I think what's helped me um, let it go a little is actually has a lot to do with the format that I've chosen. I think that I really had a hard time with the pace of release in music, because how long, you take a couple years and you make an album of 12 songs. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Which is like amazing, and you can say so many things and put so many things out, and for many musicians, like that is how they feel fully seen. But I think that the short form content, and I'm sure I'll expand in a longer form at some point,
Mm,
satisfies this need in me to create at a higher volume. And that helps me like feel connected to the truth that this video is not all of me. Like I'm going to put this out, and
yes.
guess what I'm going to do tomorrow? I'm going to put another one out. And if people hate that, I'm going to put another one out in a couple. You know what I mean? It's just like it's so fast, and I get to put so much out that it's like A, it's constantly being refreshed, and B, there's going to be such a huge archive and catalog of it that I actually feel more comfortable that no one person will ever be able to watch all of it, because it's like, yeah, there's too much for you to physically digest, and that's exactly like in line with how it is to be a person.
Except me, when I would just watch every single one of your videos. I still need to go through your beginning days of TikTok, though. But Steph, can I just say how awesome it has been to kind of hear how much you've grown on all fronts, especially as it relates to putting ourselves out there and having the vulnerability, to be seen, even if it's in a quote unquote, bad way. Yeah, I think that's really special. As we kind of wrap up stuff, would love to just ask you, one of the questions that I think I've seen on your page, and so that is, what is the best compliment you've ever received?
Oh my God. Um, I think that what comes to mind is something my Italian professor said to me,
Oh, nice.
which was, you're a doer. You say that you want to do something and then you make it happen, which does not sound like a flashy uh, or verbose compliment, because it isn't. But I think that it sticks out to me as the best compliment I've ever received, because it spoke to my personal journey and growth at that time, which was like, when I think about integrity, I think about bridging the gap between what you say and what you do. And that I've really wanted to become somebody who can be trusted and relied upon and follows through and lives what they believe. So that's why it meant so much to me.
That's a really special story, and kind of as we wrap up the episode, I'll tell you why that's so relevant after. But Steph, just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out, and I'm so glad we got to do this.